Well, friends, I am so excited to have one of my friends here, CJ Milacci. CJ, I am excited. I've been wanting to connect with you for so long. Like, we pass each other at conferences, like, we need to talk, we need to do stuff. But now we actually get like 30 minutes to have a conversation. So, first of all, welcome. And then tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Trisha. I love you. I always love our passing waves at
I know,
conferences.
literally, we're like,
It's
ooh.
sad, but it's at least we have something, right?
Yeah.
But every time I get to interact with you, it's such a joy, and I love what you do for authors and the writing community in general. So thank you for
Oh,
having
yeah.
me. Thank you for everything you do. And like you said, my name is CJ Milacci. I write stories for teens and young adults with heart-pounding adventure and hope. And I love taking readers on these exciting adventures while also
Mm,
asking difficult questions and kind of weaving in what does it look like to find hope in really dark times, and how do we overcome when it feels like evil is surrounding us and there seems to be no way to get away from it. And I think so many young people specifically deal with things that they never we you know, God never intended them to have to go through
mm,
the things they do, but we live in a broken and sinful world, and my desire is to write stories that they can relate to and that feel real and exciting, but that they can walk away with something that resonates in their heart long after they close the pages of a book. So, that's why I write, that's what I love to do, and I love interacting with my readers and found that I wrote for teen girls originally, find that I can't say that anymore. I have a lot of teen boys who love my
yeah.
books, and, there's a lot of military and guns and action, and so boys really enjoy my stories, and that's been a fun surprise for me to have so many boys who are like, "Well, it was about a girl, so I thought it was gonna be dumb, but it was actually really good." And I'm like, "Alright, so we'll take it," you know? So, but that's what I do.
Well, I'm actually listening to book one, which is The Recruit of Talionis. And then book two is The Fugitive of Talionis. And then there's also a book that goes along with a companion novel, which is Abandoned Shores. I actually, so talk about boys. Like, I'm not a teen girl. I'm not a teen boy, but I'm not a teen girl. And I'm like, this is so good. I was listening in the car with my 14-year-old daughter coming back from an appointment, and we're both like, wow, this is really good. And then I actually sent a screenshot to my husband because I bought it on Audible. I'm like, you're gonna like this. So like even
Yes.
adults, because sorry, Andy and Kristen. Let me clear my throat. So even adults, like we like, especially if we have. I mean, I've had preteens and teens in my house. Literally, my oldest is 35, so not for 35 years because it took a while for them to get to be preteen and teen, but for the last 15 years straight, just like preteens and teens. And we watch the kind of movies, like Hunger Games or different stuff with them. And so we kind of like this kind of book too, where there's action, but like you said, there's a lot of stuff that teens go through, the emotional stuff. So right in the beginning of The Recruit of Talionis, we have the main character, and she's like really struggling with the death of her brother. And we don't know the circumstances. Well, we know like the ocean drowned something. That's all I know. Or something with the ocean. We don't know very much yet. But like we have friends, they have three teen and younger daughters that just lost their 16-year-old brother
Oh
last
my
year.
goodness.
So there's real life stuff that people face that never think they're going to have to face. And I love it because right at the beginning of the book, you're immediately connecting with the character because her emotions are there.
Mm,
She's like trying to forget, and she's trying to like achieve something. I'm not going to go into too much, but achieve something to like help her cope with what she's lost. Later, I guess this is probably going to be come into play. Well, I mean, my author mind's already figuring out how this is
yes.
going to play. But right away, we care for her because we see how much she cares for her brother. Like, first couple of pages, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love her because you see how she's grieving. And I think that's important with young people, well, with anyone, not
Mm.
only just have that action packed book, but we have the emotional story. So tell us, like, how did you get the idea for this series?
So I was reading all of these young adult books. I worked in youth ministry for over a decade. And so I
Mhm.
worked with teens and young adults and would listen to the book. Like, I wanted to hear what books they were reading. I've always loved stories. So it was
Mhm.
like, oh, well, tell me what you're reading. And then I'd go read the books and they got increasingly worse throughout the years, and it was like, oh, this is young adult and I'm blushing and I'm putting the book away. I'm an adult. I can't imagine these teens reading it. Or then
Mhm.
they would take these dark turns and I'd close the book, and I had a lot in my life. I have a great family. I'm so thankful for the blessings I have, but I would feel deeply depressed after some of these stories. And I was just like, I knew what these kids were going through. And I was like, this can't be healthy that they're now reading and consuming these stories that are just
Mhm.
promoting worldly philosophies, and they're great adventures on a lot of levels, but they also just had so much content that really I knew wasn't healthy for the girls I was talking to be consuming. And so about this was many years ago now, I kind of made it my mission to try to find stories that I could suggest to them. Thankfully, now there are so many excellent books out there, but at the time, it was really hard for me to
Mhm.
find young adult stories that I didn't feel embarrassed to give them because they were so cheesy. Because there's
Yeah.
there's the good and then there's the, oh, this is a little hokey. And these kids, I'm from right outside of Philadelphia. You're in like a urban area. They
Mhm.
don't want hokey. We do need they needed a story that they felt like they could relate to, and I had the hardest time finding anything, and I felt like the Lord just kinda put it on my heart to write the story I was looking for. Didn't realize how hard it was to write a book until, it seems like, "Oh, okay, okay." But I kinda just dove in and was like, "Okay, God, if you want me to do this, I'm gonna need you to help me." And really learned a lot about the craft of writing, connected with some other fantastic authors, had great mentors, groups that I was a part of, and just grew. And through this time, this story just started. It was like the seed of a story at the very beginning of this, but it developed and it grew into so much more than I expected. And I wanted Bria, who's the protagonist,
Mhm.
to start in a place where she had her own struggle because, the premise of the story is she gets kidnapped with a whole bunch of other teens and forced to become a soldier in a city called Talionis. And so that's a big traumatic life event, right? Like
Just a little bit, just a
it's a
little bit
little bit of a
traumatic.
problem. So I was like, but I oftentimes the really hard things that hit us in life, they don't hit us in isolation, they compound with everything else going on. And
Mhm.
so to have her in an emotionally difficult place, to have her already struggling, and then to be faced with something that seems so crazy and insurmountable as well, it's like, what does that look like in that moment? Because that's what life is so often.
Yeah.
That's what so many of my readers face. That's what I faced in my own life. And so I wanted a story that grappled not only with outward struggles, but those inward, for lack of a better word, demons that, we
Mhm.
all have, that these hard things that we have to wrestle through, that we've gone through, these wounds in our own hearts and lives. And what does that look like when they're kind of smashed together? How do you survive in that? How do you find hope in that? And is there a place where you can actually see light in that darkness?
Yeah, so good. And I love that you like you said, there's not just the one problem. Just in life. Like it doesn't matter whatever difficult one thing is, there's hurricanes and there's like an election and there's like grades and like but all this stuff outwardly and then we're like
Yeah.
you need to do this and the kids are like well, I'm so overwhelmed. But
Yes.
what I love is that fiction can help us teach lessons or not teach as we're going along with the characters, we learn lessons that maybe we wouldn't have heard in a different way. Maybe definitely not from
Mm.
mom or dad, maybe not from a youth leader, but we get engrossed and we see, like, oh, she had to learn to do this. She had to become this. She had to do this. And so they can incorporate that into their own life
Yes.
without us preaching at them, and we definitely don't want books that preach. Like, we don't want the sermon that's gonna be out there, but we're gonna see her struggles. We already
Yeah.
see how you can't say, like, you have to be resilient. Like, we're gonna see her be resilient and learn to
Yeah.
maneuver in all these things in these books. And then what I love is that internal struggles, external struggles, characters already feel like there's a lot going on, have to rise to the challenge. And that's what we're asking teens to do in everyday life. Also, they're like I keep reminding myself as a mom of teens and preteens, like their brains are not fully developed. They're still learning these
Yes.
lessons. And so if they can learn these while they're enjoying a great book, like yes, please. In fact, I'm teaching writing to 25 teenagers, homeschool co-op.
Love
And
it.
I just did this lesson. We did talked about the character. You have to have internal problems, external problems. You have to multiply their problems. How can we make this work? How can we make this work? We're going to have a climax. And I said, but they're going to be a hero, but you need to plant that at the beginning of the book.
Mm.
They need to be really good at something so that when this moment comes, they're already prepared. I'm like going to take your book in there wins tomorrow. I'm gonna be like, this is what I was talking about. Listen to this, guys. And I'm gonna be able to show them this is exactly what I was talking about. So, first of all, as a writer, thank you.
Oh,
You just helped me what I've been trying to explain in class all day yesterday. I'm gonna be able to show them in your book tomorrow. So
thank
that's well
you.
done. But also, thank you as a mom of teenagers and those who work with teens, like this is like I feel like it's something I could definitely hand them over
Mm.
and not have to worry. So, how
Yeah.
important was that to you? Because you talk about like you tried to find something, obviously. Um, just share a little bit of your heart of the messages, the themes, as in the writer terms, that we can expect to come across in this series, so we feel confident to like, well, first of all, read them ourselves, but then pass them over to teens that we care about.
Yeah. Well, I believe that, like you said, stories do have this power and they can
Mhm.
teach things that teens in particular might really not want to hear from mom or dad, at dinner,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's my heart with stories is how can we take these life lessons and allow them to pierce hearts and touch lives. Now, only God can ultimately transform a heart and life,
Mhm,
but if he can take a story, and Jesus shows that he liked to do that.
mhm,
He loved
mhm,
taking a parable and illustrating the truth he was trying to teach. And I love that Jesus did that, and it makes me excited to partner with him in crafting these stories, but the themes that I really want to demonstrate, especially to kids growing up in this crazy world where, like you said, there's these insane storms and natural disasters on top of political upheaval, on top of racial issues and all
mhm.
of these it's like these compounding things, and I think back to when I was in high school, and it's not it's well, it's been a little while now, but,
You're pretty young. You're definitely younger than me, so we'll just say
but it feels like it was a different time, a totally
Yes,
different
yeah.
place, and so my desire with these stories is to incorporate themes of like I said, finding hope in darkness. What does it look like to follow God in a world where everything's falling apart? It feels like there's one bad thing after another bad thing happening. Like you said, you're teaching your teens that in their writing class that you have to make it worse and worse and worse because and it's like you kind of feel bad when you're doing it as an
I
author, but
know.
yet one of the things that I hope my readers can see in my stories is that yes, it gets worse, but nothing is without a purpose. And
Mhm.
if we can realize that as an author in our stories, we do these things, we craft these hard moments for our characters, but it's never without a purpose because a bad moment in a story with no purpose is just becomes a bad
I
story.
know, yeah,
It
I
it is
agree.
not there's no point to it. But if as an author every moment, every difficult struggle, every painful thing, every incredible setback that our characters face, if that's all intentional and on purpose in order to create in them the character they need to rise to become that hero we hinted at the
Mhm,
beginning of the story, if we do that, how much more does God do that in our lives? And I
mhm.
want my readers to see Bria and her friends go through really hard things, struggle immensely, face incredible odds, but learn what it looks like to follow God in the face of that. Discover how to stand and fight courageously, even when you think you're going to lose, because there's always a reason to stand against evil, even when it feels like evil is what's going to win at the end of the day. And I want my readers to kind of walk away empowered to fight the battles that are in their own lives, to know that the darkness they face doesn't have to consume them, even though it feels
Mhm.
like it will, and to know that there can be hope that overcomes even the darkest of places in our lives. And it's something I can't do on my own, and I pray that God uses my stories to touch readers' hearts in that deep way because these young people and and older readers too.
Yeah,
We all need that. We all need to be reminded at the end of the day that we aren't fighting a losing battle even when it feels like we're fighting a losing battle.
absolutely. What I love is that this is definitely a book that families could read together, or like if you're on a road trip with preteens, teenagers, like you put it in, it's going to be interesting enough that everyone's going to be able to listen to it and enjoy it. But also, I love you brought Jesus and the parables. You know, I was just reading a couple days ago, and the Bible talked about Jesus never spoke to the crowd unless it was in parables. But when he went back with the disciples, they asked him questions. What does this mean? What was this purpose? And so, like, this is the perfect book series that you could read it together and get the story, but then talk about, well, what does that mean?
Mm,
What does that mean in our lives? It made me think of, I'm listening to you talk, a quote that I heard recently is, the obstacle is the way. So
mm,
when we have the obstacles, we have to rise to the challenge. We have to turn to God. We have to bind together with other people. And
yeah,
that's the way we need to be going. So those obstacles in our life. And so that's perfect as we're listening to this book. Like, it seems like these obstacles are going to defeat us, but we have to do something differently. In our personal lives, we have to turn to God. We have to seek friends. We have to get our parents' help. And that
yeah,
is the way to go, the way of life. Like, we learn that as we're older, but if they can learn it when they're teenagers, like,
yeah.
amazing. Like, this is amazing. And it's through fiction, and it's through cool. And it's like, oh, cool. She just gave him a nosebleed and broke his nose, or whatever. Like,
Yes.
yay, girl, go for you. Anyway, so it's really cool that we can do that through fiction, and I think it's such an honor. And like you said, yes, it is so much harder than we think, right?
Mhm.
To come
Yes,
with theme and characters and rising conflict and all the different things.
it really is. But then I've seen for myself time and time again, God bring me through the places where I was like, I can't write this story and it's too hard. And these things that I want to do, they're like that's what my heart is to
Mhm.
touch teens' lives. But that's a hard group of people to reach in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And they're real critical. They will tell you if they don't like it, and I love that though, but it is something I've just witnessed God work, and one of the things that has really blessed me is seeing, like, readers reach out to me who are 11, 12, 14, 17, and say that my book really made an impact on them, and that
Mhm.
I had one reader say, like, I have things in my life that I need to be courageous, and watching Bria do that, like, really
Wow.
impacted, and that was like I start crying. I was like, "Thank you, Lord," because it's
Yeah.
not you at the end of the day, but, like, it is just such an honor to be able to impact one reader's life, and it is not easy to write stories, but at the same time, I love that I get this opportunity to do so, and I do hope and pray that they can be adventures that everyone in the family can escape into,
Mhm.
but then come away, like you said, with conversations that maybe before no one wanted to have, but now because we can talk about it being Bria or one of her friends, it's
Exactly.
a little more of an okay conversation topic, we're ready to have that chat. So, yeah, I do love getting to be a part of that in some small way.
Yeah, and I love, like, getting you've already gotten feedback from readers, but just it's always cool to know that there's so many more people that aren't gonna take the time to write you a letter. You know what I mean?
Mm.
That are gonna read it and it's gonna impact them some way. And maybe not even now, maybe years from now, it'll be like that lesson will be like, oh yeah, it'll come back to mind. And that's just the amazing thing about writing. It's like casting seeds out there. God can use them however he wants to use them. Which is amazing. But I do know, we talk about like passing at conferences and trying to connect when you were at the Teach 'em Diligently homeschool conference, and I kept walking by to try to talk to you, there was always like a crowd around you of parents, of teenagers. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to talk to CJ another time. This is not a place we're going to connect. Because I like got to talk to you for a second, and then more people walk up. So, how has the response been? I'm saying that prefacing it that I really saw an amazing response, especially at the homeschool conference. Like, people are like drawn and interested in this type of book.
It has been encouraging, honestly, because I write technically, I guess my books would be called dystopian in a lot of ways. So
Mhm, mhm.
and people say dystopian is dead, but yet readers still love them. And I think at the end of the day, what readers love is excellent characters and a story they can escape into. And if you can
Mhm.
give them those things, now that's a tall order, but if we
Yeah.
can try to deliver on that in some way, they will enjoy that story. And it has been really, really encouraging to go and to see these young people who are interested in these kinds of stories to like I said, I have a lot of boys. I had no idea, when I started writing how many boys but, one of my posters my cover of my book has Bria with a gun, and so one of my posters is that image, and so lots of teen boys come over, especially at a homeschool convention. They're like, "Oh, that doesn't look like a girl book, like, that looks interesting," And
Exactly.
so I had one group of boys, they were brothers, and they came up at that Teach Them Diligently convention actually, and they started grilling me on, well, how strong are the girl characters? Can they because it's not realistic for girls to always defeat the boys, and, like, they just went off about and I was like, "Well, she has certain strengths, but her other friends have other strengths." I was like it was really neat to just have them wanting these kind of stories, and I think it is because a lot of these kids feel like they're living in that type of culture
Yeah.
already. It feels like a dystopian world, like, all the
Mhm.
crazy things feel like that's what's happening to them in their lives, and especially in teen years, the emotions are so heightened. It's one of the reasons I like writing young adult. You can go all over the place with the emotion because it's very realistic for teens. Like, it is how we as teens, they just can express their emotions more fully, and it feels like it's this very heightened thing, and so I think they enjoy being able to I don't know, escape into those stories
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
see themselves like, I think see that they could rise even higher than just their emotional feelings, but, like, do something courageous and
Yeah.
have an adventure. I don't know.
I love it,
So
and I love okay, so I have to say something because you brought this up. Like, I think that the emotional intelligence of teenagers today is off the charts in, like, that conversation, like, what are her strengths? But, like, they're
yes.
the things that they're talking about, it seems like, "Is this a good book?" I don't know, before it was like, I don't know,
Yes,
at 15
yes.
years, I don't know how to explain it because I think there's lots of conversations if they're on social media, there's lots of conversations, they're hearing this opinion, they're hearing this fiction opinion, and I have seen especially with readers. So I will also preface with that. The emotional intelligence of readers who are also aware kind of the world is like here. And I remember going to the Right to Publish conference with the author conservatory kids.
Yes.
Have you interacted with them at all?
I
Like
yes, I have, and they are amazing. I
oh,
love them.
and they're not kids, so like so some are like late teens, early 20s.
Yes.
But I sat down with one girl, and I don't remember her name. And I'm like, "So, what are you reading?" And she's like, "Well, I have this book about this guy. He wrote in the 70s. He was from Eastern Europe, and he wrote about the kingdom of heaven and how it applies to the earth today, and really how we don't realize the kingdom of heaven is like around us that we need to be living." And I just was like, and I told her like, "This is the most intellectual, intelligent conversation I've had this whole conference." And
Wow.
how old are you? I think she was 20, but it was just like
Yes.
I'm blown away continually by the script. So also I think like the level, not not
It's
only
so
you have to
true.
make it like realistic characters, internal conflict, external conflict, like the level of awareness and interest and knowledge is also I mean, you have to
Yes.
really rise to the challenge. So we were talking about like they can't be cheesy. We can't just pass it by this sweet little thing story, which there has been time and place, and some readers
Yeah.
might want that and only allowed to read that. But I've been shocked by the
Yeah.
emotional intelligence of
Yes.
teens and early 20s today, like off the charts.
And I think they're asking questions that
Hmm.
I don't know that people were really asking until they were in their later 20s or 30s even, and these 15, 16, 17, 20-year-olds are asking hard questions, and they're digging to find answers, and if they don't find them with Christians, if they don't find them with our stories, if they don't find that we ask those hard questions as well, like, where is God when things are hard? Or how do you deal when something life-shattering happens in your life? If we don't give them resources for the answers to those questions, they'll find it somewhere else, but they won't find the right answers. They won't find
Right,
the ones that
exactly.
have true hope and life in them that come from God. And so I agree with you. I am so those author conservatory kids, I love them. I am so impressed by what and they're not kids, you're right, they're the young people, by what they are doing though and the stories they're writing
Hmm.
and it I want to be somebody that they can find another great story with. These
Yeah,
young people who
exactly.
do have emotional intelligence and wisdom beyond their years, it's like, let's also give them great resources to kind of feed that creative, spirit that God has given them.
Right, and if they you're right, if they're not finding it in Christian fiction. They're gonna like, they need something to satisfy that, and some of the best sellers, I
Mhm.
read it, and there is no hope. People are
None.
like, "Oh, did you love that?" The people all these books you see that are being made into movies, these bestsellers, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, "Okay, I'll read that because I wanna know," and then I'm like, "I feel empty, I feel yucky, there was no hope." And I'm like,
Yes.
yes, it was very well written. Yes, I wanted to find out what's happened, but I just feel empty. So
Yeah.
yes, I love that are offering them something different. So yay, exciting. Okay, so we have tell the series again and what's coming out for book three.
Sure. So the series is Recruit of Talionis is book one, Fugitive of Talionis is book two, and then in December, Enemy of Talionis will come out. And there is a fourth book. So, it is not a trilogy, just to clarify. I think some people think it's the last book in the series. So I'm realizing I need to, one more book next year. And
Uh-huh.
then I have Abandoned Shores, which is a standalone companion novel. So if you kind of want to get a taste for my writing, but you don't want to my books are not short, they are nice, thick things, so if you just want the a shorter story, Abandoned Shores is a great kind of standalone. It takes place years before the story of, Recruit of Talionis, but it gives you a taste of my writing and a taste of the world, before the series starts off.
Oh, so cool. And they're available Kindle, print, and Audible. So immediately I got Audible and you narrated it.
I did.
Which was amazing. So at first I'm, like, listening for you. I'm like, "Oh, yeah. Oh, oh, how did she do that voice?" So it's the first, like, 2 minutes. And then I totally forgot. Like, I'm totally into the book, totally forgot that you narrated. So what was that experience like?
Oh, so much harder than I thought it was gonna be.
Because all the accents, like, there's different characters that you
Yes,
need to know by who's talking, like, how they
yes.
sound. Yeah.
And I hated myself a little. I have too many characters, which I realized when I was trying to give them all unique voices. But I think my years of reading books to my nieces and nephews with silly voices really
Mm,
came into play here with doing the audiobooks. But I loved the experience at the same time. It was fun to see my book come to life in that way.
mhm.
And it's a unique experience and it was not easy. I have so much respect for audiobook narrators, but I wanted to be able to provide the audio version of my stories. So if listeners are looking, Fugitive of Talionis is in progress. So book 2 is not actually available in audio yet.
Now
So
you're like, "Oh, no, I have to get off and then start working
so
on that again."
yeah, it is in progress. I am getting emails asking for it, so it's definitely coming. It is just not out yet. It takes me a little longer to get those done than I wish it did, but it
Yeah.
it is in progress. It will be there eventually.
Yeah, well, as soon as we finish book 1, it better be ready, I'm just saying.
Okay, all right.
That might be next week, so you no, just kidding.
I better get on that. No
Yeah, you better get
sleeping
on it.
for me.
Exactly. Oh, so cool. Okay, so, one question I like to ask, I did not let you warn you ahead of time, but what are some Christian novels that you've enjoyed? It's always a question I like to ask. And it doesn't have to be recent, it could be like some of your all-time favorites or
Yes. I have such a struggle answering the favorite question of
yeah.
anything. Ask me my favorite food, I never know. My favorite drink, I was interviewed once and I was like, "Water. What's your favorite beverage?" "Water." I love lemonade and bubble tea. None of that came to mind. So anyway, all that to say, I struggle with these questions, but I am a huge fan of Nadine Brandis's stories. I
Mhm.
She does a great job of writing excellent, engaging fiction that also will weave in Christian truths as well. I
Mhm.
loved your book, Breath of Bones. I
Oh,
really enjoyed that so much. It was an excellent story. And I recently have enjoyed Catherine Briggs, her books. She has a duology,
I have
and
not read them yet.
they are so much fun. And let's see, Emily Haney, her books aren't. Or E.A. Hendricks, I think is what she writes them as.
Yeah, exactly.
She is my
Sorry,
cover
sorry.
designer, so I call her Emily, and then I realize I'm not saying her author name. But Suspended in the Stars, it is not a Christian fiction necessarily, but it is clean and such a fun
Mhm.
story. I highly recommend those books. I just read her second book, and it was also fabulous. So those are some that I've read recently, and then there's the classics, Chronicles of Narnia and, like, all of those
Yeah.
stories. I tend to read depending on my mood too, so it's like, sometimes you want a slower pace, and sometimes you want those high octane adventures, but
Yep.
yeah.
So good. Okay, so I love it. So where can people go to connect with you and find out more information about your books?
Yeah, so the best place to connect with me is through my newsletter. If you go to cjmilacci.com, it's Milacci. My last name is not how it sounds like it would be spelled. But if you go there, you can sign up for my newsletter, and that is my best connecting place. I love interacting with readers through my email list and all of that. I read every email I get. I try to respond as quickly as possible, but sometimes it takes a while. But I love that connecting point. I am truly atrocious with social media. I have them. You can go follow me on Instagram and Facebook. You may not see me there for months. I might pop up once in a while. No promises, but my best place is my email list, and I also have a podcast for readers. It's called Read Clean YA with CJ, and so I
Oh,
interview other
nice.
authors and highlight excellent young adult stories because I cannot write as fast as these kids can read, and I'm
Oh,
sure
that's
moms
so
and dads
true.
are always looking for new books. So I love being able to interview authors and kind of highlight their great stories as well, talk about their themes. So those places are great connecting points.
I love it. Well, we're going to have all that in the show notes, but thank you, CJ, for being here and I highly recommend these books. I cannot wait to finish the first one on audio and then wait for the second one.
Yes.
Audio. No pressure. No pressure. So look in the show notes and then be sure to check out CJ. But thank you for being here.
Thank you.